200 or 300 years ago and join the society that existed then. But I can't. And that's where the stories come in. History is simply one gigantic story, and it changes a bit depending on who's telling the story. But everybody does have their own story to tell. Take Colorado Springs back in the 1800s. Whether the people came to the City of Sunshine, like so many tuberculosis patients, or the railroads, like General Palmer, or the Pikes Peak Silver Rush, like so many miners, everybody had their own story to tell of what brought them here, and everybody had their own way of telling it. I've been volunteering in collections for about a year and a half now, and in there, I keep track of the artifacts, seeing what there is and what condition it's in. And I initially started volunteering at the Pioneers Museum for the stories. All my life, I have begged my family to tell me stories. More stories. Please just tell me one more story. Because one, it was hilarious hearing the hijinks that my parents got up to when they were my age. And two, it's just been really incredible to hear my family, or anybody for that matter, talk about history and connect their life to the history that I've only gotten to learn about. I've only heard about the uprisings in the Middle East in the 70s, and yet here we are, only a couple years ago, joking about how Grandpa was an agent in the CIA, because his family always moved out of the country right before the coup. And by volunteering at the Pioneers Museum, I could always get more stories. Here, there are always more stories to be told, stories that are just waiting for an audience. But stories fade as time goes by. They're forgotten in the passages of history. The Colorado Springs Pioneers Museum makes sure that those stories don't fade into antiquity like so many before them have. And by making sure that those stories are still remembered, the Pioneers Museum makes sure that the people of Colorado Springs can still learn from the stories, that they can see that the stories are still relevant. And when the stories are still relevant, people don't make the same mistakes that their forefathers did, or they can learn what worked really well in society in the heyday of the story, and then apply that story to today. For instance, General Palmer founded Colorado Springs as a railroad city, and the railroad brought many of the residents out here, which would eventually make Colorado Springs into the thriving city it is today. On the other hand, we can learn about the City of Sunshine, with all the sanatoriums for the tuberculosis patients, and thank goodness for how widely spread antibiotics have become in our present day. Working in collections, I get to see so many of these stories every time I work. And being only 17, this helps make the past relevant to me. Without these artifacts, I probably wouldn't have ever seen some of the most beautiful and elegant stagecoaches that used to go up and down our streets every day, or the window panes from a city building dismantled long before I was alive, or the huge clock from one of the first banks ever built in Colorado Springs. I remember one day I was working with the artifacts, and I came upon this really large and really kind of creepy taxidermy bird exhibit. It was about this wide and maybe this deep, and I was looking around in it, and there must have been just 30 different types of taxidermy birds in there, all really kind of creepily arranged and just all labeled. And I'm looking at it and I'm just thinking, okay, well, one, something is just absolutely going to jump out at me. And then two, why on earth would somebody ever make this? I mean, I love birds as much as the next person, but I really don't want 30 really creepily taxidermy ones on my wall in my house at all times. And I mean, we have artifacts like those, but these objects are making history relevant to me. History that happened long before I was born, and that I wouldn't have gotten to experience any other way. Through the Pioneers Museum, I'm able to see and understand the stories of the people who've come before me, the people whose stories would have been forgotten had it not been for the Pioneers Museum. The Pioneers Museum keeps those stories alive, both for me and for the future generations. I sometimes wonder if it would have been better to have experienced those stories as they were happening, instead of just hearing about them as I have. But time doesn't always fade the stories. Instead, sometimes it gives the listener a sense of awe when they're told. And don't we all want our stories to be like that? Good morning. Isn't she amazing? As Gretchen's mom, I'm sure you can understand how very proud I am of
her and her dedication to our fabulous Pioneers Museum. And I have no doubt that someday, and probably in the not too distant future, she will create her own amazing story that will be lovingly cared for and shared within our Pioneers Museum. And that is why I'm so grateful for the museum. It honors and protects all of the cherished stories of the many quirky and unique Colorado Springs residents who came before us. Even the very special and unique family who must have owned that 30 bird exhibit. And with that, I simply ask you to support this protector of our stories, so that all of our stories can remain safe and can be shared for generations to come. Thank you for being here this morning.